the gun that killed John Wilkes Booth. Mainstream history does not dispute that John Wilkes Booth chose only a one-shot Derringer to kill President Lincoln. Yet the actual gun that killed Booth still invokes mystery and debate, even though the weapon used is not a mystery. The discrepant issue is not over what killed Booth. The enduring debate is, why did Booth need to be shot, and who fired the murder weapon while standing so close to Lincoln's helplessly trapped assassin? Just as Detective Luther Baker had reached the end of a long surrender negotiation with Booth, a startling discharge of a gun dropped the fugitive. While at that same moment, Detective Everton Conger made good his threat to force Booth's surrender by burning down William Garrett's tobacco barn. Both Luther Baker and Mr. Garrett's young son, John Garrett, saw Booth being shot, but no one at the scene saw who fired the weapon that severed Booth's spinal cord. Only one of the two accused suspects could have shot Booth. But only one man could have used the gun that killed him. Doctors Joseph K. Barnes and Joseph J. Woodward performed the autopsy on Booth's body, and both physicians agreed that the cause of death was from a pistol ball, fired from a cavalry revolver at a distance of only about 12 feet away. Everton Conger ordered Sergeant Boston Corbett placed under arrest for Booth's murder. However, only 3 men of the 26-man military detachment that captured Booth at Garrett's farm were issued revolvers. Luther Baker, Everton Conger, and the cavalry commander Lieutenant Edward P. Doherty were the only 3 who had pistols. Corbett and all the men of the 16th New York Cavalry carried only a carbine. When Detective Baker returned Booth's body to Washington, he stated to Joseph Holt, "I stood near the barn door, saw a light inside, and immediately sprung to the door and unlocked it. By the light of the blaze I saw Booth stoop toward the fire. When the blaze sprung up, he immediately wheeled and came toward the door with a carbine in one hand. He took, I think, about 5 or 6 steps in the direction of the door when I heard the discharge of a piece. 5 or 6 steps is about 12 feet from the spot where Conger lit the fire. I supposed at the time that Conger shot Booth, and I said, 'What on earth did you shoot him for?' Then the idea flashed on my mind that if Conger did shoot Booth, it had better not be known." Luther Baker instantly realized that shooting Booth was unwarranted, illegal, and if Conger was guilty, it must be covered up. Baker's deposition to Holt was the first official eyewitness account of how Booth was shot. Oddly, Holt prevented L. B. Baker and John W. Garrett from testifying at the conspiracy trial. Only Conger, Doherty, and Corbett were chosen as conspiracy prosecution witnesses to explain why Booth never made it back to Washington alive. When L. B. Baker tried to claim partial credit for Booth's capture, his deposition to Holt could not be found. In December 1865, 6 months after the conspiracy trial and execution of Booth's accomplices, both Everton Conger and L. B. Baker gave a joint report to Edwin Stanton about killing Booth, which was placed on file in the War Department archives but never published. Consequently, at Andrew Johnson's impeachment trial of 1867, as well as during the John Surratt conspiracy trial, it was realized that L. B. Baker's recovered, but redacted, deposition to Holt contradicted Conger and Doherty's 1865 conspiracy trial testimonies of Booth's capture. And after Corbett's conspiracy trial testimony of Booth's murder, it became painfully clear to everyone that his saga of the shooting was nothing less than the fabricated ravings of a mentally insane lunatic. The motive for Booth's murder. The actual circumstances that occurred just before and after Booth's murder can never be trusted as fully factual, because everyone who testified about Booth's capture gave a different narrative. When Booth was shot, Luther Baker placed him about 12 feet from the fire that Conger had just ignited. Booth's autopsy proved that a cavalry revolver killed him. During the conspiracy trial, Conger admitted that he lit the fire, could then see Booth inside the barn, and he too added, "The only thing I noticed in his hand was a carbine." One feeble attempt to explain away Corbett's carbine murder weapon was to claim that Booth also had a pistol in his hand, and that he shot himself. But that narrative could not explain how Booth shot himself in the back of his neck from 12 feet away. Then in a July 1965 Civil War Times article it stated that Stanton issued Corbett a pistol only after Booth was dead. The narrative of Booth's murder then changed again, suggesting that the military detachment killed an imposter at Garrett's farm and that Booth escaped to live out the rest of his life in the West. And that after Booth died his body was mummified. Whereas Everton Conger had the right gun, was about 12 feet from Booth when Baker heard the shot, and Conger knew what it would mean to the conspiracy investigation if Booth lived to be prosecuted. Yet the motive for killing Booth does not hinge on who actually shot him. Booth's death alone ended any chance of ever learning the true nature of the conspiracy that killed Lincoln. Booth's newspaper confession letter, along with his now 6 missing diary confession pages, remains unknown because dead men tell no tales. Secretary Stanton, Joseph Holt, John Bingham, and Colonel Henry Burnett did all they could to conceal any evidence that would expose the secret Booth carried to his grave. The military prosecution had to withhold evidence and suppress select testimonies about killing both Lincoln and Booth, because that withheld evidence and those excluded testimonies would have revealed a much different narrative than history now teaches. Destroying Booth's confession was the prosecution's motive to keep Lincoln's assassin from returning to Washington alive, and also why the actual circumstances had better not be known. However, history now has FBI forensic evidence that Booth's diary pages were removed during the 2 years Stanton's War Department had the book hidden from the public. There is also credible evidence that John Matthews gave Booth's newspaper confession to William P. Wood, who gave the confession letter to Stanton before Booth was captured. But American mainstream historians have chosen instead to also take Luther Baker's advice, which was, if Conger shot Booth, it had better not be known. Today, any revision that argues Boston Corbett could not have shot Booth is arrogantly dismissed as a conspiracy theory. History apologists who wish to cover up the government conspirators who plotted to remove the president from serving out a full second term endorse the baseless theory that a Richmond, Virginia plot sponsored President Lincoln's assassination. Sources for the Lincoln conspiracy cover-up are found at www.reasonlincoln.com. The website articles section has a contact address for questions or comments, and the home page features 2 books by Don Thomas, available for purchase at Amazon.com.